Good morning, beautiful souls. I am your host, Angela Ahimsa, and you've tuned in to Feed Your Chakras, broadcasting from Toronto and streaming globally on Just TV, Roku, Meta, and the NCG television network. Today, we welcome a whose work lives in the intersection of healing, leadership, artistry, and planetary services. His name is Luke Kohen, and he is an sacred activist. He's a poet. I recently found out he is a singer and producer and a healer. And he is a cultural evolutionist whose journey spans nearly 2 decades of devotion to personal development, systematic change, and regenerative community building. As a speaker, mentor, and artist, and an ecopreneur, Luke carries the medicine of myth, the fire of impact, and the wisdom of ancient lineages woven into modern innovations. So he's not just creating change, he's embodying it, guiding leaders, founders, and visionaries into cultivating both inner coherence and collective harmony. So I'm honored to have him here today as my guest, and we're going to explore themes of power, purpose, and sacred leadership, and diving into the solar plexus chakra today and how we can each hold the key to igniting aligned action in ourselves and in the world. So thank you so much, Luke, for joining.
Beautiful. I
Yeah.
love hearing my bio remixed. I was like, I see what you did there. Awesome. What's up, everyone? Nice to be here with you.
Yes, I am. I actually this is the first time me and him have spoken in person, but I follow him on Instagram, and I recommend you do too. He's very unapologetic and authentic in the deliverance of his message, and I truly appreciate that.
Been forged well in the fires.
Yeah. Okay, so you have been called a visionary in sacred activism and in cultural evolution. What was the point that first awakened that fire within you, and how did you know that you had to rise into your power?
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like there's two parts to that. There's the call to rise into power, and then there's the call to stewardship of culture. And
Mm-hmm.
the rise to power was a byproduct of choosing to heal myself. I had a healing crisis when I was 22. So my body broke down. I had a lot of stored grief from losing my brother-in-law on 9/11. I had been pushing my body really hard as a martial artist and competitive athlete, and was addicted to substances and just driving myself way too hard. And yeah, my body gave out. I manifested a spinal injury, so I went from being this really competitive athlete to walking with a cane overnight. And obviously, when you go through that much of a drastic initiation, you're going to feel pretty beat up. So I felt pretty victimized, and obviously didn't have the healthy outlets. I didn't really enjoy um, the sort of substance abuse culture that I was raised in, or that was surrounding me in that stage of my life. So I lost all my healthy outlets, and discovered yoga. And yoga was the first thing that gave me any sense of peace, and outside of being gaslit by the sort of Western uh, medical system, which was like, we don't know what's wrong with you. Good luck, kid. Like you probably need a hip replacement when you're 30. And happy to say that I'm 42 and I'm sprinting and in the best shape of my life. But yeah, at the time it was pretty devastating. And so I'd say my commitment to first healing my body um, brought me to spirituality, and that brought me to more therapeutic integrative approaches. So I met my mentor in bioenergetics therapy and other therapeutic modalities, and that began a path of self-empowerment. And naturally, as I healed and I became more empowered, I wanted to pass that on to other people, and ended up down in Costa Rica. It's like one of those, like probably the first wave of people drinking medicine down there in 2008. And there's all these pre 2012 sort of prophecy ceremonies. And I'd say what lit that fire is the fire itself, the sacred fire. I had the fortune of being around fires that were being held by First Nations elders and wisdom keepers, and something in my soul remembered. This direct connection with the fire, with the elements, is in all our lineages, all our ancestry. Is meant to steward these beautiful elements that are part of our natural world. And yeah, I got this really deep knowing that I had to help build community and create spaces for people to meet each other and meet their kindred souls, and begin to come together and celebrate in a sacred way, and shift the culture from this sort of intoxicating, numbing, space to something more connected. So when I got back from Costa Rica, I had a vision for a production company in my heart and met my business partner at the time, Srikala. Shout out to Karel, amazing artist as well and producer. And he had been a Hare Krishna monk for like 6 years and grew up in Brooklyn. Was also into hip hop. So we had this like hip hop kirtan, like Vedic
I love
sort
that.
of New York connection. We started doing these open mics at Jivamukti for like hip hop, and then we started gathering community and throwing these big warehouse events with that were sober, and you'd forget you're in New York City. So that's kind of where the first call, and then I discovered the transformational festival scene, and I started to bring the festival scene and sort of the First Nations fire together, and inviting elders to come keep a fire at a festival or come present their workshops and give them more of a platform. And there was a lot of that happening organically through other people I know in the communities as well. So it was, I have my part to play, but I think there was an emergence that was also happening at the time. And didn't know about California festival culture. We were kind of doing our East Coast version organically at the same time. So that's where, that's sort of the origins of all that.
I love that. Every time, like I tune in, I learn something new about you because his birthday 2 days ago, and I was like, and then I just found out about your hip and all that other stuff, and you mentioned being medically gaslit. So like
Yeah.
this is even deeper. Okay, so that was great. Thank you. Very profound. I also, have gone through kind of a similar journey, not the same timeline, but
Sure.
it's interesting. So I was just wondering, what does authentic power mean to you? And how does that differ from the distorted, gaslighting versions of power we see in the world today?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is such a beautiful question. I love speaking on this because we've inherited a patriarchal, multi-generationally traumatized worldview of power,
Yes.
and that is that goes back thousands of years actually into a power over ideology. And so it's echoed in our myths, and it's echoed in our current media, because media is a form of myth telling, our movies, our stories. And so often the portrayal of power is this kind of power over dynamic, and even to the point where we sort of glorify villains, even, like the mafiosos and the get it at all costs, and make the money despite killing people and doing unaliving or whatever they say these days,
Mhm.
people, the all costs. And that's not actually power. Power comes from the soul, power comes from the divine. That's true power. And so I think we're in the journey of deconditioning. And it's okay to cultivate physical power, as a martial artist, and having gone through the humbling of my body, like when my body just broke down and I could no longer train, even though I had cultivated a lot of strength and speed, and was basically training to be an MMA fighter before it was cool, before UFC was like all over the place. This is like early days, and mixed martial arts. And I feel like the cultivation of power to harm is part of what ripened my karma to the point where I had a breakdown in my body. And there was a quote that came to me in that time that changed my life. And it said, what is more powerful? A man who can conquer 500 men, or a man who can conquer himself? And it
Ooh.
kind of shifted this inflection point of seeing power as merely physical or outside, to an internal journey of warrior. Like, what does it mean to be a spiritual warrior, or a warrior of compassion, a warrior that goes in and faces the shadows within one's own consciousness and begins to dismantle the trauma? So there is an emerging new archetype of power on the planet, which is anchored in compassion. And I think people like Martin Luther King Jr. and John Lennon, and so many people in the community now are examples of a type of soul power, of love informed power that is forged from the internal. And
Mm-hmm.
that internal power can't be uh, forced. You can't fake it.
Yeah.
It's forged in the fires of initiation. And that feeling of power is in service. It's not about control. It's about, actually, more about surrender and channeling power in service to something greater than ourselves, that we get to really come forth into our stewardship as warriors.
Yeah, because like true leaders lift other people up, and it's just like once again, ego, which is solar plexus, is the feel that you need to dominate or control, and that's kind of on the lower end of having power. So
Right. Yeah. There's, Gene Keys talks about it well. There's the shadow side, and then there's the exalted, like when you alchemize the shadow into something more exalted, it takes on a totally new expression for each astrological sign. Every archetype that exists, there's that shadow side, and there's the when it becomes integrated and more into the wholesome nature of its knowing itself in its divinity, it has a totally different expression. And I've had to go through a lot of really painful, messy lessons as a Leo in the age of Aquarius with an Aquarius moon, of like, okay, like this is when you need to take up space, and this
yeah.
is when you need to disappear.
Hmm.
And the mastery of learning when to take up space and when to get completely out of the way. And we have a modern culture where there's such a sort of narcissistic blind spot of like validation and being seen and heard and perceived a certain way, that those survival strategies get a little bit, again, more externally focused. It's not like overt domination, but it's subvertive domination. It's like the attempt to control perception, which
Yeah.
is equally distorted in its own way. So when we learn to get out of our own way, then the authenticity of the soul can start to come through. We're not trying to maintain some kind of identity. We're out of our own way, and then that aspect of our authentic power can start to shine through, and it just feels better for everybody. It's not like, it's like you can only fool people for so long, trying to mitigate perception until the shadow is faced and integrated enough that you can genuinely express, and there's no anticipation of backlash, or like the shame, the hidden or resisted shame isn't like driving the expression.
Well, you're obviously someone who's done a lot of shadow work. What practices would you say? And for those who are not familiar with the solar plexus, it is the third chakra, and it governs basically our ego. It's our sense of willpower, identity. It's where our confidence and our strength comes. But on the shadow end, it's when you're overly egotistical, or you come from that egoic stance where you have to compare or feel better than something. So how would you, Luke, practice and cultivate a strong, healthy relationship with this inner fire as you're
Yeah,
going on this journey?
yeah, I love. Okay, that's right. You're the chakra goddess, so
Yes, that's
work
right.
working with the third chakra. So from the healing modalities that I trained in, there's the again the shadow side, right, and then the exalted side. So a lot of people think of the chakras, they're actually just thinking of the front. There's
Hmm.
actually a back to the chakras. There's a
Yeah, yeah, the
cone, there's a
receiving.
cone in both sides, right? And so the back of the third chakra is unconscious will. So we have to bring the conscious awareness into the unconscious to make it whole. And so
Hmm.
to cultivate integrated power, we have to be willing to dive into where the unconscious parts of the self, or of the generational trauma, is attempting to control life, and why. So for me, there was a lot of unconscious aspects of survival that were in the background of my experience that I was unaware of, like the parts of me that didn't feel safe. For example, like I got into martial arts because I grew up in a really unsafe part of New York City, and I got jumped coming home from the basketball court. I've had multiple times where I got robbed, and eventually I was like, okay, like I need to know how to like feel powerful in my body, because I just feel really unsafe. And that was a healthy version of reclaiming my power in that stage. And then at some point, that unsafety still never resolved. So I could prepare myself to be like, I weaponized my body, my arms and my legs and my knees and my elbows and my whole, I weaponized myself, but that didn't necessarily make me feel safer, right? So there, that unconscious part in the back of the solar plexus was still awake in its ability to make decisions. So we have to bring the light of consciousness into the unconscious to make it whole. And so each chakra has its front end that's more of a conscious, more subconscious, like we can take
Hmm.
active, but it's harder to get in touch with the back ones and start to recalibrate the back ones and start to clean out the residual traumas and conditionings in the back of the chakras. That's where, like, especially the back of the solar plexus is quite difficult to be with, because there is, a lot of yeah, just big shadow material there.
Yeah. I find that so interesting because you say it's hard to reach. Same with the heart chakra, because we're supposed to receive on this end too, and
Hmm.
you can't get, you literally physically
You
can't
can't
get.
touch the back of your heart.
Yeah, and so it's like it's so symbolic because you need someone else to receive in that
Mm,
sense. So you're
right.
actually the first person that actually knew about all that. So thank you. That was amazing sharing that.
Yeah.
Um, he also, this is something else I just found out today. He just recently moved into a retreat center where he does all sorts of ceremonial and sacred work. And you were talking kind of about cleaning out the solar plexus, but you also help people clean out their physical bodies, which is also still governed by the material
Right.
world.
Yeah. I found with years of like plant medicine and all the multidimensional stuff, it's really easy to go up and out. A lot of us that are sensitive have a proclivity to move towards the unseen or the mystical. And it's actually really hard to be here in our bodies and in
Hmm.
relationship. It's relationships churn up all the unprocessed trauma, all the family stuff. And that reflects in the body. It can reflect in the digestive system. It can reflect in the adrenals. It can reflect in the thyroid. And so, I even though I like healed from my original sort of breakdown, I manifested two other kind of versions of burnout as an entrepreneur later. Even with all the tools, all the yogic breathing, all the qigong, I still had like identity stuff that was driving me to be more than, and pushing the limits of my consciousness in all these ways to try to accomplish. And I ran myself thin in other ways, even with all the tools I had. And so there was a lot of physical breakdown to break through that happened, plus all the stuff that I was already healing from like a long time ago, that sort of integrated in my understanding of detoxification. I studied Ayurveda, I studied a lot of Chinese medicine, but when I got into detox work, there was a functional medicine approach, and there was something really grounded and holistic about like getting into the cells and not doing the up and out thing, but the coming down and in, and like flushing the liver and cleaning out the parasites, and being more mindful of food addictions and like little ways that we can cope or numb, or being too reliant on stimulants. And I got to really practice a lot of what I had been cultivating in just a more embodied way when I got into that work. And it forced me to slow down so much that that part of my identity that was so like lost in the need to be and do more finally got to just chill out and feel stillness again, which is where it all started for me, of feeling stillness for the first time, like deep, like the backdrop of creation level stillness.
Nice. I feel like I'm being called for that stillness right now,
Right.
actually. Um, so what I really like about detoxing, I actually only started detoxing because I always thought I was healthy and I ate the right things. But detoxing is, I think, so essential, and people don't realize how infested they probably even are. Because like
Mm-hmm.
they mentioned parasites, and we all have parasites and stuff. But there's also cumulative damage that people never take into account, like the environmental toxins that we're all exposed to daily, just
Yeah.
even through touching through our skin, and people don't realize.
Glyphosate.
Yeah, exactly. So could you just walk us through maybe like one of your most popular protocols, just so people can.
Yeah. So well, I have a business partner who's a functional medicine doctor, and we actually do completely customized work because it's really important to look at the blood and see what's going on in people's hormones, and like get a sense of like, oh, this might be an issue in like 3 years from now, like you're showing some early signs of like cardiovascular thing, like whatever it is. And what I've learned too is, again, the interesting intersection of behavior and identity and lineage and mindset. It's all ties into it. A lot of people with autoimmune issues have trauma around boundaries. They don't know how to set strong boundaries, and so they're like wei qi field, which is in qigong your sort of first line of defense, is like an expanded, like healthy auric membrane, right? Like you have this egg of light around you that it's like, no, it knows how to like say you're not allowed into my space. But people that have had a lot of abuse or violation, their wei qi fields collapsed, and therefore they don't have that first line of defense. So they have a lot of autoimmune issues based on the loss of boundaries or certain kinds of violations. So I started to study the intersection of like, I was super into trauma healing already, but when I got into the detox, I was like, and I was experiencing like layers of deeper stuff as I was doing these cleanses. I was like, oh snap! Like there's something to the intersection. Like I knew it conceptually, and I experienced it in an embodied way to degrees through other ways of approaching it, but it was like a new understanding of that kind of intersection. And so, I would say that, in terms of protocols, like, yeah, we're inundated with things that we didn't have to deal with at one point in history, and that now we're all dealing with degrees of heavy metals. We're all dealing with degrees of glyphosate exposure, graphene exposure. We're all dealing with degrees of like more stress, like more stresses than we've ever had. I mean, look at the state of the world. So some people's are their cortisol levels are very high, and like if we can teach them to just regulate, some of the issues will go away, and then you can get to the deeper stuff. So for me, it's like it's such a custom, personalized journey that I wouldn't necessarily like just say like here's the protocol. But
Mhm.
what I would say is there is an intersection between trauma and detoxification that is unexplored, that I'm excited to pioneer more with my business partner, Dr. Greg, who's also a network spinal chiropractic and gets trauma out of the spine on a
Mhm.
developmental level, from the soul level all the way down to like, in utero level stuff. And when you change the spine and the way that the bioelectric energy is circulating to all the organs, and your nervous system is not gripping in like unsafety, then circulation can start to move into areas that it wasn't getting to, and we can
Mhm.
actually start to rejuvenate, slow the aging process, get the neurology functioning. And so, yeah, I quite like the scientific side of it, even though I'm more naturally drawn to mysticism and like, spirituality. There, there's such a fascinating intersection for me of like how to effectively detox, and what that actually means, and as a shift in lifestyle and slowing down as a part of it, versus like the sort of Western, like just take some supplements and then do this and then biohack and then you'll get there. It's like very like yang. And part of
Yeah,
the issue is that we're already in like this hyper yang culture, which is making people sick. So it's kind of like
totally.
you can't use the same thing that created the problem. Like really deep rejuvenation and detoxification is going to require a shift in lifestyle out of this like hyper individualistic, capitalistic sort of colonial worldview on healing.
Mm.
It's not a plus b equals c kind of situation. It's like very unique to each being as a holistic being. We're all so unique, and we all have some very different, unique traumas and gifts and challenges, and the journey of unlocking that really does do something when you go on your healing journey and you start to become your own healer in that regard. Wow, like as I'm sure you also have experienced.
No, I really like that. I like the bio individual approach because I feel that everybody's always just looking. No, I mean, you can probably attest this. Everybody's looking for that quick fix
Quick
solution.
hit, yeah,
It doesn't exist,
yeah,
right? Like we all
yeah,
have to do our sacred work.
totally.
So this retreat center you mentioned is in England, right?
Yeah, we're in Avalon in
Oh, I
Glastonbury.
love the name. It's an
Yeah,
Avalon. It's so
yeah.
magical.
It is literally like a place of magic.
Okay, so is that where people go to this retreat center? Is that
People come on pilgrimages to Avalon because there's a ton of sacred sites. This is kind of where the Arthurian mysteries are. Of
hmm
It was like the last stronghold of like Celtic mysticism in England before it was fully converted. There's so many layers of history here, and I went on an ancestral pilgrimage last year to Ireland and Italy and here and all over to sort of make a deeper step into, a lot of my spirituality comes from like my soul lineage, but I was like I need to look into my like body DNA lineage a bit. And I absolutely fell in love with this land in a way that I would have never ever, if you were like asked me 3 years ago, hey, so how do you feel about moving to England, I would have laughed in your face. I'd be like, there's no coconuts there, first of all, you know. But there's something about the land that called me into stewardship, and I've been nomadic since 2017. So to get the hit of like actually putting my staff in the ground was really confronting for me and not what I was expecting at all. And I've grown to like the crisper air in the fall, and I've grown to appreciate pears more than mangoes, and little things that it's there's still, and it's really powerful. Like the veils are quite thin here. You go to the abbey or you go to the Tor or the Chalice Well, and it's like, wow, you like close your eyes and you are dropping in, very deeply. So it already attracts thousands of people for it's a bit like Mount Shasta, Hogwarts, kind of like the high streets filled with
Yes.
crystal
Yes.
shops and all that. But again, like I'm not here for the fluffy spirituality. I'm here for like the really deep ancient mysticism, but in a grounded way. And I just feel like a lot of people like detox is kind of how we one of the ways we take our power back, and that's where my passion is. And so yeah, the owners that I'm in connection with, they had run this place for a long time. It was already like a detox center, and so um, yeah, we hit it off, and they took it off the market, and yeah, so we already have like a lot of the tools here, the hyperbaric chambers, the infrared saunas, and I healed mold infections back in the day. I had like mold exposure in New York. I understand the main kinds of things that mess people up: black mold, parasites, candida, these kinds of things that there's nothing in the Western medical literature about. Heavy metal toxicity buildup, nervous system burnout, these kinds of things that just are not addressed holistically. To me, no matter what your spirituality is, whether you're on a medicine path or you're into yoga or whatever it is, if you can't regulate your nervous system and your body is like you're dragging it around to ceremonies, you're dragging it around the world, and you're like you can't actually down regulate out of that sort of fight or flight response, it does, like, no matter what spiritual ideals you have, it's unsustainable. And so I
Mm-hmm.
want to give people that foundational grounded work for their purpose. And it's taken me a long time to understand that. And I just want to make the journey so much easier for souls, because you don't have to go through like 15, 20 years of initiation to get some of these, like what I had to go through. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
really want to make it easier for the next soul.
Yeah.
And I remember doing a Vipassana, and on like the 10th day, my guidance from life was like, dude, if you can't hold these visions in your body, they're never going to come to fruition.
Mm-hmm.
Like, your physical body cannot hold the level of visionary work that you're here to do. So get your body on par with your visions, bring it
Yeah.
up to speed. And our bodies are the most dense part of us. So in terms of like from an ascension, sort of perspective, it's the last part of us to transform. You can heal at the soul level all day, and your liver can still be sluggish. You
Yeah.
know, we live in a physical universe, so
That's it's kind of been a theme that's been coming up a lot lately, is so many spiritual people are kind of, oh, I'm here in the 5D, but you
yeah,
really have to have, it's your temple, it's your sacred temple, and as you mentioned, it's the most dense part here, but you also have to be able to ground, and if you're in that state of fight or flight, you are not grounded, and so you can't sustain and contain that higher energy
yeah.
in a balanced integrative way.
I think what gets challenging for people is they touch that part of the truth of who they are. They experience their multidimensional self. They experience their soul frequency, and then their coping strategies come back. Maybe after a peak experience, maybe they were at a festival, or they were on medicine or something, and they're like, oh, here I am, and then it goes away, and then they get really frustrated and sad when their coping strategies come back, because those things are woven into the nervous system. And
Mm-hmm.
so and then all these types of ideals and identities form, trying to grasp onto when we touch the truth of who we are, because we are powerful, divine, multidimensional beings, and it is painful to be in separation. It's
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable. There's big feelings, but without coming into an honest relationship with that shadow material, it is impossible to sustain a quote unquote higher vibration until you deal with the shadow material, and that
Mm-hmm.
includes what's stored in the body,
Yeah.
that's accumulated. We inherit our mother's lymphatic systems,
Hmm.
which is nuts.
We
Like
also
you,
we also inherit our lineage, like the traumas and
yeah,
stuff from our ancestors. So it's like you really have to
150%.
do their work on top of your own.
Right. You're the generational curse breaker. That's why you
Yeah.
came.
Yes.
So instead of being victimized by it, can you embrace it as a profound moment of initiation on the planet,
Hmm.
and say, you actually have the power to make new choices.
Hmm.
They may not be easy. You may feel like you're dying, but you're you know
You're not going to die.
you're not actually going to die by going through an identity death.
Just an ego death. Yeah.
And this is the sad, unfortunate thing for a lot of people unaliving themselves out there in the youth, with all this bombardment of frequency and inundation of external stuff, or because we're conditioned to be externally focused in our culture,
Mm-hmm.
that are doing that because they don't have the rites of passage that we're meant to have from,
Yeah.
tribal cultures, where you go through a figurative death when you're 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, whatever. There were initiations in place to shed a version of yourself, and
Mm-hmm.
that impulse to die as we have known ourselves is woven into the morphogenic fabric of consciousness as human beings. We want to alter our consciousness. We want to shed, and that's natural. But what has been lost is the accompaniment of an elder, the accompaniment of support, the accompaniment of ritual to allow it to be a metaphoric death and resurrection. And
Yeah.
the resurrection mysteries that's a big part of Avalon. It's like there's legends that Magdalene came here and Yeshua came here and Joseph of Artemia came here, and that the Essenes and the Druids were homies, and there's a whole mystery school sort of ancient mythology that are woven in this land, in the ancient lands of Europe, that were all about the resurrection mysteries. And so we've lost the lineages of resurrection with the power over sort of church takeover, hijacking of magic to cut people off from the direct connection of their own inner Christ, and the need to go through resurrection and rites.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're designed as souls to evolve through initiation and resurrection.
Plus, the illusion now is also extremely distorted because we have social media. And you mentioned a few things earlier in like the detox program. Like I mentioned, my parasite purges environmental parasites like heavy metals and black mold and stuff.
Digital detoxes.
Yeah, but like that is a parasite too, because
Right.
it's constantly telling you and creating comparison and just portraying this unrealistic sense of ideals that everybody's trying to attain to, and
Right.
they're so unrealistic, but that
Right.
has become the reality, and
Right.
and this is why we have this onset of people unaliving themselves, as you said,
Yeah.
and I think that's one of the biggest parasites is the mind manipulation that we're
Yeah,
all
we really are being socially engineered and socially conditioned, fragmented in so many different ways. There is a real war on consciousness. That's the banned TEDx talk from Graham Hancock. It's called The War on Consciousness.
Mhm.
And why would that be banned?
Nice that is banned.
Yeah, not surprised, not surprised, but
Yeah.
it's real, because, and the ways that happens is so fascinating to me. The different infiltrative cultural programs and etheric implants, and you get exposed to a conspiracy video, and all of a sudden you're in so much fear that you're actually creating the very thing that you're afraid of, because you're not holding your vibration in it. And
Mhm.
that wormhole was designed to pull you in as a light worker and hijack your imagination to dream in that world for these sort of inverted beings. And so there's a lot of technologies being utilized for those purposes, and there's lots of astral activity in Instagram and online. It's like a digital representation of the astral plane. You could find anything from
Mhm.
sexual content to mysticism. It's the astral. It's just
Yeah.
the physical digital manifestation of the astral plane.
It is the
And
algorithm sometimes, like things will just pop up and it's not even like, how they listen to everything, but like I'm literally just thinking of something and it pops up for me. So
yeah, it's wild. It's
it
wild. Do one
is.
search and you have ads for like, you're
Oh yeah.
talking about something. I'm thinking about going on this trip. And they're like, have you thought
That's
about
also
going on this
part of
trip?
the illusion.
Right. Yeah, because again, if we're in our power as multidimensional beings, we have more capacity to co-create reality than previously, and that's how those inverted beings lose control. As if enough empowered people are on the planet, then the game is up.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so you've been pretty outspoken on a lot of topics and even considered controversial at times, which I love. What gave you the courage to continue to speak your truth, even when it might have cost you opportunities or getting shadow banned, for example?
Yeah, I think that at some point we have to really commit to our values and to understand what integrity is for us, for ourselves. And part of my journey of taking self-responsibility and having to face my own BS, was seeing where I was out of integrity. Um, and as I came into more and more integrity, I found that in 2020 there was a part of me that had been afraid to live fully,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to find what I was willing to die for before could start fully. And most people are not afraid to die; they're afraid of imprisonment, or they're afraid of living fully. And there's
Mm-hmm.
sort of this. I was talking to I have. I love being. I'm an intergenerational bridge. Like I was just having tea with a 74-year-old auntie here, and she was talking about her like deep passion for multidimensional freedom, and that's what we're actually here for, is to
Mhm,
experience this like fully expressed soul expanded version of reality, and where we have the opposite systems in place,
mhm.
literally to try to control and box you into a very conditioned framework of consciousness that you'll never experience your divinity. You'll be reactionary and uh, cut off from source, and cut off from the mother earth, and cut off from your own truth, your own. So once you access your authenticity in your soul, you have to take a stand for it. It's not even a choice at some point. So what
Mhm.
did you decide? It was like, it's just like life took over at some point, and I had to get out of the way. And in
Mhm.
my devotion to serving life, my own humanity had to alchemize, because I had definitely an ancestral fear of speaking truth, past life trauma, being a mystic and being persecuted. Like that all is something I still negotiate at times, but I do it anyway. I
Mhm.
choose to speak irregardless of those fears, irregardless of anything, because I come back again and again. What am I willing to die for? And I don't need to necessarily create that experience, but I have to be willing to find that warrior stance of
Yeah.
this matters enough that like the worst case scenario is I'm killed for this. I have to say it. I have to speak it out. And I think that there's ways that people speak out that is more, look at me, or like, look how virtuous I am. And like, it's actually about them. And it's kind
Yeah.
of repulsive in some ways to like speak out just so that you can be seen and heard and validated, that have morality. But that's not actual morality. The like, it has to bubble up from your core
Mhm.
when you speak out, or you create art that is, you don't have any other choice, because it feels like you're suffocating if you don't say anything.
Yeah.
So I think that, like for me, the when I wrote "You Need to Hear This" after George Floyd, and I read it at this small gathering, and my buddy Ika heard it, he's kind of like a B-list actor in Hollywood, and he's a black man, and he grew up in Australia, and he's very aware of the systemic issues, and he heard the piece, and he's like, "Bro, we have to do a video of this." And I'm like, "I don't know, man. I'm like this, half Jewish white guy in New York. I don't think it's my place to talk about like African history and like systemic oppression and racism." And he's like, "No, you're the perfect voice. Like, we're gonna make this video. We have to get this out of your notebook." And I went through this whole initiatic process with him and my buddy Pete, who shot this. We did this almost 24-hour shoot during the big C, when we were all in Bali, and
Mm. The big
during
C.
it, yeah, the
That's
big
funny.
C, the great pause, yeah,
Yes.
scamdemic 2021. No.
Pandemic.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so we were there, and I was really facing my fear of speaking truth. Like I was going through an ancestral healing during the shoot, and they were kind of like my doula bros, who were like, "Bro, this is like, just speak this truth." So I had some support that was kind of coaxing me to bring this really powerful confronting piece out. And then the next piece I did was like less confronting, and like the more that I'm finding that part of my artistic human expression is to find a way to do it in the most eloquent, universally connected way. It's like I'm not trying to just be like oppositional and make people wrong. I actually want to touch hearts and souls and awaken them to some of the magic and beauty, and not necessarily just be like, you're an asshole, and like you don't deserve love. Like I think that that's a really shitty approach to sharing truth, of like needing to be right and needing to be better than like any of that stuff. So like for me, speaking truth in the process of authentic empowered expression is it's just the soul uninhibited in its yeah, its highest expression as it possibly can fathom, and that's going to continue to refine. Our art is a craft that we need to tend to, and so now I'm finding myself like I ebb and flow between this like activist, like confront the system versus just build the new, and I
Yeah.
ebb and flow between this is not okay, and I need to like speak to this,
The
and like
moral dilemma every
this
day.
is this
Focus
is
on what you
yeah,
want.
like calling it out or versus calling it up, and then like so my human self is like I like to warrior up. I'm like like when Standing Rock was happening, I really wanted to go there, and I never got that permission from spirit. I never got that consent from the tribe. So like yeah, come hold the field with us. And so like for me, like sacred activism, it needs to bubble up from our soul and overflow. If we're making an identity around it, or if we're in hate or reactivity or condemnation or contempt, we're not in the frequency of sacred activism. We're in reaction, and when you're in reaction, you're most likely a pawn of someone's agenda. So
Yeah.
sacred activism needs to come from the source of life itself. If it's
And they
not that,
can only
slow
trigger
down.
you ungrounded.
Yeah, if you're like if your anus is in your solar plexus, maybe you should wait until it drops back down. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? Before you say something.
Yes. That's so funny. Yeah, thank you. I also had that's kind of when I stood into my truth too, was in the big C. I've been shadow banned ever
Yep.
since. It's because then since then, once you kind of start speaking and standing up for what you believe in, it's like you can't go back into that little quiet person, you know. So that is the initiation. I feel there's an initiation for a lot of people, actually.
Yeah, and I think it's coming for all of us. I think we
Mhm.
all are gonna have the choice to either stand in for life, or be afraid of your comforts being taken away, or lose, or be letting your survival be manipulated enough that you consent to something unethical.
This is not okay. I like how you
Right.
said that.
Yeah, this is not okay.
Yeah, there's a
Right.
lot of not okays right now as we build
Right.
this earth, right? It's
Right.
that like happy balance of like trying to raise people up, but you also just can't let stuff happen and be a passive observer.
Right. Sacred confrontation.
Hmm.
But
And,
what
and addressing things in a more evolved, higher dimensional version of yourself, where you're not from a triggered place, but you're from a place of like, hey, collective, this is not okay. Let's focus on solutions rather than
yeah,
fighting each other, however it
yeah.
wants to come out.
Triggered responses are also going to happen. It's part of
Yes.
being human. People are going to go into reaction. People are going to respond. It's going to be messy. But ideally, with a craft, or with your message, or the thing that you're forging, and I would say art is a form of alchemy that I really appreciate. It's
Yes.
helped me heal things more so than anything. In some ways, I used to think I had to do 20 million ayahuasca ceremonies, where I just need to write a song about a breakup. You know what I mean? It's like there's something in the act of art that alchemizes, and I think that like our greatest revolutionary acts right now is making really honest, authentic, soul infused art, and like planting gardens and
I could
learning.
not agree more because I'm an
Mm,
artist, and for part of me, like my throat chakra was probably my most blocked chakra, and I'm
mm,
working through it now. I'm a performer, but you
nice,
actually said something, and I sing a lot in Spanish because that was also part of my throat chakra activation is
nice.
learning speaking another language, right? But I'm actually working on the song by Shakira, and it's Viajando por el Mundo, so it's like traveling the world. But
Mm,
you actually said the lyrics in that, and I was practicing it before I came on. And what is it? It says it's not existing. Like life isn't for existing; it's to feel alive. And I'm gonna enjoy my life while I came. My fear is not of dying, but not having lived. And I feel like that's where most people are. They're in that survival mode, and they're not truly living. They're not truly expressing their truth. They're not truly standing for what they believe in. And I feel
mhm,
like that is the probably one of the greatest sins of humanity at this point. We're all just in
mm,
survival mode. Um, yeah. So
mm.
as a sacred leader and sacred activist, what does it look like in action, and how is sacred activism different than conventional activism, like going out and protesting against all these not okay
Yeah.
things?
I mean, I feel like I shared on it, like, where's your come from,
Mm-hmm.
and how identified are you with the doing? Is it life genuinely moving through you, or are you following the next thing? There's lots of things that, s- the way that my elders taught me, and the way that I understand consent, and permissions, is that sacredness is you're approaching things with reverence. That's part of what makes it sacred. We're recognizing the sacredness of life itself, the sacredness of water, the sacredness of other people's sovereign, autonomous choices. So we can't control what anyone else does or says, but we have authority over how we respond. So sacred activism is a conscious choice. It is not a reaction.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
And and everyone has their different station in creation. Who am I to say that someone should be doing something? I can know what's correct for me, and share my passion, invite other people. Hey guys, I'm really passionate about this thing
Mm-hmm.
that I'm seeing that matters. Like, join me. Here's an invitation. But the shaming others into action, it, that's a spectrum that we've seen be
Well,
used.
that's also low vibrational too, right? As the sacred leader, I feel like you're supposed to bring people into the higher vibrational way of alignment.
Yeah, I mean, I'm wary of the high and low vibrational frameworks, because there can become toxic positivity that, we can mm, get into a pattern of, when someone's genuine stuff is bubbling up, that there's not a space for it, because it
Mm-hmm.
makes people uncomfortable. But people's rage, people's grief, people's unprocessed, trauma, there should be a place for it to be alchemized. And if it's and those things are in the spiritual community considered very low vibrational. If someone's having a heavy
I
day,
don't
a
mean
heavy
it
moment,
bad. I mean, you can still hold space for that. That
right,
actually is high vibrational. You
right,
know, I'm not saying like gaslight people out of the problem, but you can also hold space for it and then bring it back into a more compassionate. That's what I mean, like the
right,
compassion without the
right,
shame.
right. So I think, yeah. So that helps me understand what you mean when you say high vibrational, low vibrational. There's a lot of collective, subjective projections on what that means, or that
Mm-hmm. No,
we
I
impose
agree.
on ourselves. So just that's
Nobody
why I
wants to
spoke
do
to it.
that work or shine light on the darkness.
Right, right, exactly. So, and leadership for me, it wasn't like I'm going to be a leader. It was like I'm getting my ass kicked by life and being forged in the fires, and I'm moving forward, and I'm showing up for myself first and foremost. And then all of a sudden, I look to my right and I look to my left, and there's community forming, and then I look to my, and then like more people, and then there's a circle. You know what I mean? It's not like, I think a lot of leaders, or people that self-identify as leaders, is they like the idea or the ideal of the identity of the leader,
Mm-hmm.
but a leader is just someone who leads himself.
Yeah.
They go first in certain ways to forge something that hasn't existed, and then life self-organizes, and they're all of a sudden naturally emerging in a position of leadership, but they didn't consciously choose it. They didn't decide to be a leader one day. They
So
decided. Yeah, like, it's like all these people that think they're shamans. It's like, you don't choose to become a shaman. You don't
mm-hmm.
choose to become a medicine man. That's a high level of responsibility. But people love the identity of it. They love the belonging that comes from it. They love the culture of it that's gotten half baked. And so we have to be very careful of the identity structures when it comes to any of these things. How we
Mm-hmm.
self-identify, how we label others, because at the end of the day, we're all a spark of source consciousness, and we all have a unique journey of what it means to retether to that, that's unique to us. And if we get too caught up on the identity, we're actually going to be in a self-deceptive version of of egoic
Mm-hmm.
spiritualism. It's like,
Rather than be performative, be the pioneer on the path to personal liberation.
yeah, I mean, pioneering will happen. It's
Hmm.
it,
Somebody's
you
got to
know
do it.
well, it's going to happen whether you choose it or not. Like,
Yeah.
we're in a time where we have to innovate, we have to adapt. But so if you even if you let, like, I'm a regenerative blah blah blah, and I'm going to pioneer, you can get too caught in the identity of that,
Hmm.
and then that's something you have to maintain, and then you're
Hmm.
blocking the current of life and how to listen to life effectively enough to, like, respond that might look different than if you were overly identified with that role.
I
Does
love
that
that.
make sense?
Yeah, it's totally solar plexus too. It's being trapped in that ego, like that identity of who you think you are.
Right. And the ego, I don't think the ego lives in any one chakra. I think it lives in as an
Totally.
adaptive part of the whole nervous system that's overstimulated. And the way that I understand ego is more from a bioenergetics therapeutic perspective. Is it's just the coping strategies that we developed as children to survive our environments and our relationships and certain feelings. And so that part can get sneaky and take over and use sophisticated spirituality or any framework of religion, any framework of philosophy, and use it for its own agendas and benefits. And that's the really unglamorous part of the shadow work that a lot of people don't talk about, is how to dismantle that sneaky part of the consciousness that will just be like, I'm gonna take this and use it for my own purposes. And it's just always there. It's just always there lurking in the background. And we have to get like almost hyper vigilantly aware of that part of the identity that can literally hijack any part of spirituality for its own agendas.
Well said. Okay, so I wanted to do this in the beginning and I completely forgot. So before we close out today, can you share a mantra, a prayer, or a piece of wisdom that helps keep you anchored and just to help inspire or uplift the collective in their personal power and unapologetic authenticity?
I'm happy to. Yeah, I just want to acknowledge everyone's courage for just choosing to be alive right now. Like wherever you are on your journey, you know, it's important to acknowledge the small steps that we make in our day-to-day lives of just overcoming where we have resistance or where we have doubt or fear. And I think the journey, as I understand it, of self-mastery in the age of Aquarius is self-love beyond any ideals means meeting the stuff that's really hard to love and actually learning how to do it. And that's going to look different for everybody. Not a hummingbirds and rainbows all the time version of self-love is really getting into the unprocessed, unexpressed material and learning how to be with it more and more and more and more. And it's the journey of the soul reparenting our own child out of those self-adaptive strategies. And that takes a lot of courage. And so I want to acknowledge the courage of our listeners for being alive. And I want to acknowledge those that are committing to a path of self-healing, self-examination, inquiry, cultivating virtues, leaving vices behind. That takes courage. And the prayer that I really love and I'm feeling guided in this moment to share is one of the more hermetic, mystic prayers that was hidden inside of the Bible. And it's the you might have heard it, but each section has an alchemical code for the soul and for the light body. So the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside still waters. She restoreth my soul. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table for me in the presence of thine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever and ever. Amen.
Amen.
So
Wow, that's
each section has an alchemy to it. The rod and thy staff, that's your central channel. My cup runneth over is the pineal pituitary glands inside the chalice.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's really deep mysticism inside of that prayer, and invite people to go on the journey of exploring that for themselves.
I love it. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you so much for showing up today with your clarity, your prayers, your integrity, and your soul. And your words are a transmission and an invocation for all of us to remember the power that lives within, not as domination, but as devotion. And to everyone tuning in, if this conversation stirred something within your soul or sparked a deeper urge to inquire or remind you of your own path to leadership, I invite you to connect with Luke. He is on Instagram as Luke Kohen with a K. He also has a website, lukekohen.com, and he has an amazing retreat center and some other offerings, which I'll let him fill in right now so I don't miss them.
No worries. Yeah, thank you so much again for having me on and for your stance in consciousness and being a voice of empowerment for humanity. I'm really honored to be here. It's Luke Kohen, and that's a Kohen. That's my Spotify, that's my website, that's my Substack is Return of the Bard. And I have free offerings, I have paid offerings, I have everything in between. And so I just want to get people the tools that can help them. We have a global breathwork summit that I'm part of curating through the Institute of Energetics. That's September 26th to 28th. That's free. Check that out in my stories. That'll be there. And then I have my free community in Substack, which is the portal into everything else that I offer. So Instagram is a good way, and my website's a good way. And if you want to rock out to some conscious hip hop and neo soul, you can check out my YouTube or my Spotify.
He's actually when I posted our flyer, I just typed in his name because I only had just found out he's a singer. So he's got a whole long list of stuff there, and it's very cool too. It kind of has that hip hoppy vibe, but it's more mystical, which I dig. So
yeah, we gotta bring in the new mythology some way. So hip hop's just the medium for that.
Kind of similar to Polish Ambassador. I don't know if you're familiar with him. That's the vibe I got just from like the one song, but I really like him. I think he's
a great DJ.
Yeah.
I've met him back in the day.
Nice.
When him and Ayla were together.
Okay.
Yeah.
I listen to a lot of their songs. So I also practice his songs too. I just need to come out.
Fun. Love it. Awesome. Well, thanks again for having me on. And
so much. Yes, and for everybody, if this episode nourished you, please like, share, and subscribe, and follow me. I'm the Chakra Goddess on Instagram for more conscious conversations and radiant tools to feed your mind, body, and spirit. Until next time, stay rooted in your truth, stay authentic and in your light, and remember to feed your chakras. Peace, love, and luminous blessings.
Oh.
you.